During the 19th century, changes in cycling went hand in hand with changes in technology and changes in lifestyle. At the peak of cycling's popularity in America, Iver Johnson moved his arms and cyclery factory to Fitchburg.
This particular bike here, 1892, would have been the first year of bicycle production here in Fitchburg. They moved up from Worcester, 1891, to the location over on River Street. And so by the time they got up and running, 1892, I think would have been the first actual year bikes coming out of the factory. One of the unique things, it's called a cushion tire. Prior to this, it was just a real thin strip, small, hard rubber on the tires, for the, on the rims, and they were starting to figure out they could make it more comfortable by adding larger diameter rubber tires onto it. So, as well as being first production year, this was also called a cushion tire safety. That was also part of the cushion feature, as well as the seat being leather. This is all basically suspension work. So bumpy roads, back in the day, you got to figure 1892, roads weren't paved like they are nowadays. Most of them were probably cobble, dirt, and so forth. This back here is actually how you get going. You put your foot up on it, get kicking, swing your leg over, get pedaling. These bikes were not equipped with any type of foot brake. The only means of stopping would have been the paddle brake in the front. As you can see, we have foot pegs in the front fork. So if you're going down a hill, you just pick your feet up and rest them there. If you get up a good head of steam, you're not going to stop this bike real quick like. It is fixed. If the wheel's rolling, your pedals are going too, which means so are your feet. Probably not far. I would say within town. I mean, there were only a few people that would actually do long distances on these. This would have been either probably oil, and you actually light it just like you would, a regular indoor lantern of the day. And that would be your headlight. It was actually quite the machine back in the day. Just the way the parts are manufactured. This whole assembly here is actually how they tension the chain. It actually pivots. You adjust the bolt, it swings the whole arm down and tensions the chain on the bike. Too tight, it's not going to pedal smoothly. Too loose, same idea. You do want a little bit of play, not too tight, not too loose. Fenders have actually been on bicycles probably all the way back to 1892. That would have been originally equipped with a rear fender on it. This particular one is circa 1932. Some of the features that we were talking about, early kickstands. Everybody is familiar with the style they have now. Swings out to the side. You use your foot to kick it down. These actually had one that swung down from the back and actually mimicked the motorcycle as well. At approximately 1898, bicycles did start coming with foot brakes on them. Foot brake, you can back pedal to stop the bike. The wheel will coast, but you can back pedal to stop the bike. Everything would have been made on this bike in-house from start to finish. And if you think about the man hours it took to make one of these, it was incredible. To have done that now, you're probably talking thousands of dollars for a bicycle. The cost of these bikes back in the day, this probably would have ran around $60, which for 1932 was probably still quite a bit of money. Quality-wise, Iver Johnson was known to be the best quality bike made. This bike would have been intended for recreation. I mean, just cruising around, you know, looking cool, being the hot kid on the block, saying, you know, look at my bike. Here we have an excellent unrestored example of a circa 1928 Iver Johnson motorcycle. Now, it was named motorcycle because it kind of mimics motorcycles of the time. This would have been something that either a kid or a young man would have purchased, not being able to afford a real motorcycle. It has a tank, which actually has a function. There would have been a battery cell inside to operate your headlight. Book rack, carry your books to school, what have you. Another trademark, this particular tank is similar to the unrestored motorcycle I have, with the exception of this is actually an octagon shape. The unrestored bicycle has a round version. When they came out with the octagon, this was actually another one of their trademark styles. No other bicycle manufacturer of the time did anything unique like this. To remove the tank, it actually was pretty easy. You have a couple clips in the back that hold it to the frame. You would have taken those off, and the whole tank would have just swung out, and you take the cap off the front. It's actually two pieces here. And you can access it, change the battery, or what have you. Some versions of this, early bikes, had what would be called a toolbox tank. There would have been a door on the side where you could actually store tools or anything like that. Okay, in reference to the head badge, these would have come in several different finishes. All it is, it's a stamped piece of steel. This particular one has been brass plated to give it the gold appearance. It was also available as a nickel finish and or even a plain finish. This particular one I have not gotten around to filling in. Where it says Iver Johnson is actually would have been filled in with paint color. As far as I know, there was no particular rhyme or reason as to what style or plating of badge they would have put on any particular bike. It may have come down to the person assembling the bike deciding, you know, this one looks good on this bike, this one looks good on that bike. But again, these probably would have been made in-house. This is probably another one of Iver Johnson's trademark. This would have been called a fork truss or fork strut. This particular one comes up either side. It was an extension going over to the fork, coming into a single up to the stem. It really didn't really serve any purpose other than aesthetics. Most kids, when they got a bike like this, probably ended up stripping everything off of it to save weight, believe it or not. Some of these can weigh upwards of 60 pounds. So by stripping off, you know, an all-steel tank, steel fork strut, the rear carrier, you're probably taking 10, 15 pounds of weight off the bike. And of course, with kids being competitive, you want to be able to be the fastest kid on the block.
This particular bike is a 1932 truss bridge roadster. And what I really like about this bike is the entire looks of it. I think it pretty much is a work of art. It's a beautiful looking bike. It has the Messenger long spring seat on it, the full mud guards. The large handlebars, they were called Ohio bars by Iver Johnson. The 28-inch wheels, Person's Supreme pedals with the drop stand. It's just a nice-looking bike. This is probably my favorite Iver Johnson bike, the truss bridge bike. And when they refer to the truss bridge, they refer to this extra piece of metal that was added below the top tube. And that was an Iver Johnson kind of feature. Since 1880, pretty much, the bicycle frame hadn't changed a lot. It was pretty much a diamond frame. This was restored fairly recently by Scott Kinsman, who was just up here, and he did a fantastic job on it. It's just a beautiful looking bike. And this is an example, though, when I did get this bike, it was in fairly rough shape, and it was a pretty good candidate to be restored. So we took it, and he worked on it for about a year. I got it back, and it's just a great example of a truss bridge.
As well as collecting, I also restore some of them. I didn't restore this particular bicycle because it is in such great original condition. All the original decaling is still on it. The Iver Johnson, the motorcycle decal. There's enough of the original paint left on it, and the overall condition where it's you want to save it. This is where you're preserving a piece of history. You can paint a bike 1,000 times. It's only original once. There is a fine line that you want to kind of watch when choosing to restore one. If it has all the original paint, maybe a little rusty chrome, stuff like that, you want to leave it alone. I choose the ones that really need to be redone. No more original paint, no markings of any sort left on it. Pretty rough shape. Paint-wise, you just use automotive grade. Nothing special. Colors, use catalogs as reference. And sometimes, if you see colors you like, you just redo it in that fashion. The fact that I've been doing this for better than or close to 20 years, I have enough excess inventory, we'll say. Cranks, you name it, parts, I have it. This is all original with the exception of perhaps the leather on the seat. So this is an extremely nice example of a 1892.
This particular bike is another great example of a truss bridge roadster. It's a little earlier than the last one. This is manufactured about 1916. But this one is a well-preserved original bike. There really isn't anything on it that has been replaced. I did add on the drop stand just to kind of make it stand up. But it's got the original long spring Troxel saddle, which is beautiful. It has the original red paint with the green spears, which is kind of a nice combination of the Iver Johnson bike. The early mud guards with 28-inch wheels and their wood rims. So this is a great example of a truss bridge roadster, unrestored and original. And like Scott had mentioned earlier, this bike is in such nice shape for an original bike that you would never take a bike like this and strip it down and refinish it. It's just a beautifully preserved antique bike.
Iver Johnson, is they were able to control the quality of the bikes they manufactured. They did all the stuff in-house. The rear dropouts would have been drop forged. The cranks would have been drop forged in-house. Stem parts all forged in-house.
Yeah, this particular bike is a really nice example of an early track bike, track racer. And this particular bike was made by Iver Johnson for the J.P. Lovell Sporting Goods Company in Boston, but they actually manufactured it for them. This bike was built to be raced on indoor banked wooden velodromes, and it was kind of the sport of the day at the turn of the century. So this particular bike has the standard diamond frame with the drop handlebars, the leather grips on it, which are all original to the bike. It has the early rat trap pedals on the bike. It has a nice, what they call a Faber one-piece crank, which is a little bit hard to find today. The tires are the racing style tires. with the wooden rims. I believe they were made by Lobdell, I believe. So this is a great example of an early track racer made by the Iver Johnson Company for another manufacturer. And of course, after a while, Iver Johnson made their own racing style bikes. But this is a pretty hard bike to find today in this particular condition. Nice example.
This is a woman's bike. As you can see, the step through. I believe it's about a 1941. Back then, women riding bicycles would often wear skirts, and this web netting was to prevent the skirt from getting caught in the back wheel. Everything on this is pretty original. It's missing its handle grips, and it's missing the stand that would come up and catch in the back. But these would have been the original fenders, metal frames on the wheels, original tires, and the messenger seat, which was very common in several of the bikes from that era. This is an Iver Johnson children's bike. Looks a lot like the woman's bike that we had before here. I was really glad I bought this. It's got hard tires, as Pete or Scott told you ahead of time. This was nothing more than decorative, completely original. I think the coolest part about this bike is the seat, the way it was designed to match the big boy seats. Just a really nice example. I did a lot of cleaning on this by hand, but I've elected not to touch this one. I think it's in reasonable, good condition for its age, and I'm going to leave it this way.
This particular model here, 1941, would have been the last production year. They stopped producing bicycles to help the war effort. They were also, of course, a firearm manufacturer, so all efforts kind of faded away from bicycles and switched over to firearms.
"30 years after Iver Johnson stopped manufacturing bicycles in Fitchburg, the shop closed. Guns were no longer made in the city. Smaller businesses occupy some of the buildings on River Street. Fitchburg's Art Longsjoe was the first American to compete in the Summer and Winter Olympics in the same year. The speed skater and cyclist was only 26 when he was killed after a car crash. For 50 years, a race in his honor was held in July. After a 2-year hiatus, the race returned in 2013.
Try and work on them. We are on the whistle. Nicely done. They are rolling. We are getting ready for our
Chris Ragusa, CCB rider. One of the
going into it, and only so many will fit. Here they go into that hay bale turn. Now they go into it, and it is all about brave men. Where do you go? Down goes a rider hard. Down goes 2. Down goes 3. Down goes 4. And we have a rider down in that turn. And now they come out of this and into the sprint they go. The dangerous business. We have a huge crash down below, but we have a big drama up here on the sprint stretch. Jason Croteau back to his winning ways as a junior. Nicely done.
These 3 collectors and others decided to show their Fitchburg-made bicycles at the Fitchburg Historical Society for the occasion.
I've found this to be a very exciting exhibition, and I hope that it's one of many that bring a large, broad audience and a new audience into the Fitchburg Historical Society to learn a little bit more about what makes this such a unique community with such an exciting history of innovation, technical innovation, economic growth, and local architectural beauty. This bike is from 1936, and it was donated to us by Glenn Fossa. It came down to him through his family. He remembers it being in the attic and riding it as a kid. This was actually donated to the Historical Society about the first day that I came to work here. It was very exciting to be here and have him come in and say, I've got this beautiful bike. I know exactly where it came from. We know the story of how it was bought for my family by grandfather. And so it was a terrific way of seeing exactly how closely the collection here and a work like this connects with Fitchburg and with our mission at the Historical Society.
Collecting Iver Johnson bicycles for close to 20 years now, and it's kind of a passion / obsession.
There's a story behind this bike. This is an Iver Johnson children's bike. The story behind this one is, like I said, I collect bikes. My wife just doesn't understand. And I bought this on eBay, and we were heading to the Cape, and I knew it was going to be delivered, and UPS comes to my house in the afternoon. And we were coming home Monday afternoon, and I was worried that this box was going to be on my front porch, and I was going to have to explain to my wife what was in it. And when I got home, it wasn't there. So I'm thinking, great, Tuesday morning, I'll get up. In the afternoon, I'll come home early, and I'll grab the bike, put it in a bunch, she'll never see it. Well, Tuesday morning, I'm sitting in the kitchen having a cup of coffee. My wife leaves before I do. And she's walking out the door. 10 minutes before that happened, I heard my dog barking, thought nothing of it. When my wife walked outside, she came back in with a sheet of paper from UPS. UPS never delivers ever in the morning. That morning they delivered. She came in and she says, I suppose it's another bike. And I went, yeah, I'm sorry.
I've been collecting bikes for approximately, I'd say 4 or 5 years now. And I've amassed at this point probably half a dozen of them, 6, 7 bikes. And really enjoy collecting the Iver Johnson bikes. The way that I got into the Iver Johnson bikes is I've always collected Fitchburg memorabilia, and I've also always enjoyed bicycles. You know, who can't remember their first bike as a kid and how much fun it was? And one day the thought just occurred to me, kind of a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, geez, I like Fitchburg memorabilia. Iver Johnson bikes made in Fitchburg, it just seemed to be the right fit. And I kind of got into collecting them, and it was just took off from there. When Iver Johnson passed away in, I believe it was 1895, his son Frederick, his oldest son Frederick, took over the business. And Frederick was really a marketing genius. He came up with some incredible marketing ideas. He was the one that came up with Hammer the Hammer for their firearms, which increased firearm sales tremendously. He was the one that contacted Major Taylor, a very famous bicycle rider of the day, and he rode an Iver Johnson bike, which again promoted the Iver Johnson bikes. And in 1901, Frederick came up with this truss idea on a bicycle. And it became a marketing grand slam for Iver Johnson. And they used it continually to sell their bikes. And they claimed that the truss not only added a lot of strength and a lot of rigidity to the frame, but it also, when you were actually pedaling the bike, the force on the pedal, they claimed that all of the force that you exerted on the bike was transferred to forward motion and not lost in the frame flexing or bending. Was that true? I really don't know. How do you find the bikes? It's kind of interesting. There's an obvious easy way to find them, and that's kind of the standard places like eBay and Craigslist. And I've been pretty lucky on eBay and Craigslist finding a few bikes. But I think the best way to find the bikes overall is networking with your friends. If you kind of get the word out there that you're looking for bikes, they'll contact you if one happens to turn up, and if you're lucky enough to make the right deal on it, you can acquire it. So I've been pretty lucky talking to people in the area with the Iver Johnson bikes. I think one of the things we have going for us in the Fitchburg area is with Iver Johnson right here in town, and with huge factories and huge retail stores in Fitchburg, Worcester, Boston, the area pretty much has got a lot of Iver Johnson bikes. Pretty much everyone knows that in Fitchburg, the Johnsonia building was one of the main places where Iver Johnson sold bikes. And they had retail stores like that size in Worcester and in Boston. So a lot of Iver Johnson bikes were sold in the greater New England area. So there's still a lot of them around in people's attics, in their cellars, in their garages. They're kind of just sitting there. This particular bike right here, this is a 1941 Iver Johnson Airlight. It was a lightweight bicycle of its day. It's a 2-speed, which is kind of a unique little feature. Diamond frame. But this particular bicycle was brought to the Fitchburg landfill, and it was ready to be pushed off the back of a pickup truck. And some of you may remember quite a character in town. His name is Gibby Lashwa. He plays at a lot of the different functions. He plays the accordion. Well, Gibby saw this bike being pushed off the back of a pickup truck, and he picked it up. And he gave it to a friend of his who had it for years and years and held on to it. And then through another friend of mine, I heard that he had it. And I made a contact with him, and then he agreed to sell it. So this particular bike was brought to the landfill, and I hate to even think of how many of these bikes are buried at the old landfill off of Airport Road, Falula Road, where a lot of them were just dumped and buried. This particular bike I found on Craigslist, and it was on Craigslist for quite a long time, and nobody was jumping on it, and it was right in Massachusetts. I forgot the name of this town, but it was sort of the north on 128. And I waited for quite a long time. I didn't act on it myself. And I finally said, I'm going to call the guy and see if it's still available. It was. And I went down and I picked it up. And I'm glad I did, because when I saw it, it just was a nice example of this kind of a bike.
Has anybody pushed this yet? Would you like to hear what this is going to sound like?